am Momon. I regularly make commentaries on current affairs, art, and movies with the aim of identifying brewing societal thought trends. Upon requests from my followers, especially those on the Chinese internet, I will be taking a particular stream of movies, the leftist movie. Let's dive in. Around the year 2000, we witnessed the emergence of films commemorating the leftist movement in the 60s. Among them, one particular category dedicated itself to showcasing the mental breakdown of urban middle-class individuals. There were generally two ways to go about it. The first one showcases how socially acknowledged successful individuals voluntarily subject themselves to consumerism, transactional social interactions, and the lack of intimate relationships. They eventually invite mental breakdowns, hallucinations, and even impulses toward violence and murder, as seen in films like Fight Club and American Psycho. This type of film finds its roots in the works of leftist intellectuals of the 1960s, such as Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. If we trace further back, there's 1950s musical Sunset Boulevard, Ibsen's Peer Gynt from the late 19th century, Molière's Miser, and Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. Together, they portray a societal class, called the bourgeoisie or middle class, whose precarious position in the society dooms them to a frail mental state. Even though people in this class have taken up different societal roles throughout history, from freemen in city-states, to usurers, to overseas merchants, to salesmen, to clerks, to technical workers, and Wall Street elites, they always dwell on the brink of a nervous breakdown. Another type of film depicts the mental collapse by combining middle-class family life with psychoanalysis, adding ethical conflicts, crimes of passion, murders from romantic disputes, and so on. Recent examples include the TV series Why Women Kill, which spans from the countercultural 1960s to the rise of consumerism in the 1980s and 1990s, the post-millennium infested with excessive political correctness. Other notable examples are Desperate Housewives, American Beauty, and then Kramer vs. Kramer, Possession starring Isabella Adjani, and Bergman's Scene from a Marriage. Earlier examples include Ibsen's A Doll's House and other works by early playwrights addressing bourgeois family life. For the sake of time, we will be focusing solely on the first type of movies, which depicts young middle-class individuals who mentally fall apart for feeling both stuck and lost in the city, ultimately losing humanity. Before we start, we need to address one pivotal question: what is the middle class? The middle class has always been a relative concept. The corresponding French term bourgeoisie initially referred to the freemen of medieval city-states who were neither nobles nor peasant serfs. Thus, early satirical novels often applied this idea to target Jewish moneylenders. In the French essay genre, the term bourgeoisie was used to describe people in the third estate who were neither aristocrats nor clergymen. Since early bourgeois revolutions saw much of their capital coming from the royal and noble classes, the bourgeoisie at that time were essentially merchants serving royal interests. Later on, with the rise of bourgeois revolutions and the decline of feudal and clerical powers worldwide, many lords and landowners turned against royal power and joined the capitalist class. At the same time, the merchants who served royal interests also joined the capitalist class. As the term bourgeoisie struggled to represent new middle class, the word petite was added on bourgeoisie, and this word petite bourgeoisie is what we now recognize as white-collar and gold-collar workers, including everyone from Wall Street elites to salespersons. This is why we now see a discrepancy in the meaning of the word bourgeoisie. While in certain contexts it is used to refer to capitalists, while in others it refers to white-collar, gold-collar workers, the Chinese translation of the word, which often merges or confuses bourgeoisie and petite bourgeoisie, stands as a testament to the evolution of the term itself. In the famous quartet of plays about misers, Molière's Miser, Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, Balzac's Eugenie Grande, and Gogol's Dassault, we observe this progression. Shakespeare's Miser in the 16th century and Molière in the 17th century were portrayed as crazy Jewish moneylenders. By the 18th century, Balzac's muses engaged in commercial and financial speculation, and by the 19th century, Gogol's muses had evolved into a complete swindler. These muses are portrayed in extremely pathological states. Shakespeare had a relatively lenient view of the bourgeoisie, disliking only financial capitalists. The other three authors systematically criticized the bourgeoisie's inherent predatory and conservative nature, also alongside the feudal nobility and landlords. Molière's Overtaken starved his family and himself, sneaking into the barn at night to steal buckwheat. Balzac's Grande stared at his gold with a child's gaze for hours. Gogol's Chichkov, a landowner and bourgeois merchant, bought deserts to exploit for profits. In the works of these authors, the early bourgeoisie were inherently constrained even in their early stages. Historically, they not only served to monarchy, but also frequently engaged in the practice where government positions could be purchased. As I mentioned before, their revolutions were never complete, and they often had financial ties to the feudal nobility. Regarding today's topic, the early bourgeoisie represented the middle class of society. They were urban wanderers reliant on the nobility, meticulously counting every penny and willing to do anything for money, while constantly fearing the potential loss of their wealth at any moment. Henrik Ibsen and Nikolai Gogol lived during the same period, but Gogol, being Russian, entered capitalist society relatively late, which is why he is discussed in the first part. By Ibsen's era, Marxism had a systematic discourse on every social class. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels provide a brilliant description of the petite bourgeoisie. In countries where modern civilization has become fully developed, a new class of petty bourgeois has been formed, fluctuating between proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and ever renewing itself as a supplementary part of bourgeois society. Here, the middle class transforms into the petite bourgeoisie. Similar to the misers who once aspired to the aristocratic lifestyle, they aim to uphold a dignified life in every way. They strive to maintain respectability, carefully navigating every aspect of life, meticulously studying ways to make money. They hope to climb the social ladder and elevate their social status and lives, much like the early capitalists did. However, amidst the tides of the times, they might end up like many others, failing in their speculations, unable to ascend, losing their souls, and getting lost in the capitalist system. Peer Gynt was a character pathologically immersed in fantasies, becoming a victim of power worship and arrogancy. In his youth, he had many crude and reckless behaviors, suffering from the tricks of fate many times. Peer Gynt ran away from home, traveled around. He then suffered a shipwreck on his way back at an old age, causing him destitute like when he first left. He was a wave rider in the early stages of capitalist development. Like all the young people caught up in the gold rush, either become overnight rich or ending up with nothing aside. During China's May 4th movement, realism was advocated to promote theatrical reform, with Ibsen's plays being a primary influence. On the Chinese internet, many descriptions of Gogol and Ibsen have been distorted by bananas to fit a capitalist narrative. For instance, claims that Ibsen's protagonists used individualism to fight feudal forces, or that bourgeoisie resisted the corrupt feudal serfdom system are largely nonsense. From its inception, the bourgeoisie has been inherently profit-driven and exploitative. Countless writers have documented and portrayed the true nature and the inherent limitations of the bourgeoisie, both in its early stages and later in deeply industrialized societies. I encourage everyone to read the origin works to gain a true understanding. After entering the film era, a large number of critic film works about the middle class were added to the previous basis of dramas and novels. At the same time, left-wing culture had undergone significant development for more than half a century, while capitalism was rapidly expanding globally. Marxism, on one hand, was greatly enriched by combining with linguistics, and psychology. On the other hand, since the entire world had entered capitalist society, Marxism itself began to split. After the Great Depression of the 1920s, enormously works focusing on the urban middle-class life and the mental state emerged. After World War II, the Beat generation made many innovative attempts in content and form. By the 1960s, the global left-wing movement reached its peak, with unprecedented hits in films, novels, and music. After the 1950s, psychoanalytic theories gradually developed, and left-wing theories also evolved. Foucault's entire book, Madness and Civilization, is about how madness is defined by institutions and discourse. He focused on madness because rationality is actually defined by scholasticism and the capitalist discourse. Furthermore, after the 1950s, the development of psychology and Lacan's psychoanalytic theories, combined with left-wing cultural movement, made fragile middle-class life a favorite subject for writers and artists. In the 1960s, left-wing cultural movements and rebellious liberal youth encountered the gradual segmentation of global industrialization. Everyone was born to be a screw in the machine, trapped in the entire industrial system. The beautiful middle-class lifestyle became an illusion. Therefore, when the post-World War II baby boom met the dead-end industrialization and the endless proxy wars waged by the military-industrial complex in the 1960s, it naturally led to widespread disillusionment. Thus, Arthur Miller, born during the Great Depression and grew up in the 1950s and the 1960s, became an excellent representative. We choose Arthur Miller because his works largely focus on the middle class, characterized by being caught in the middle, compromising with capitalists above and deceiving ordinary people below, suffering from immensely with no possibility of self-redemption. In All My Sons, a profit-driven businessman sells defective components to the government, causing the deaths of 21 pilots. After his younger son learns the truth, he flies a plane to commit suicide to atone for his father's sins. Years later, when the reason for his son's death is revealed, his father also commits suicide. Similarly, Death of a Salesman portrays a salesman living in the illusion of American dream, gradually seeing his dreams shattered and losing his moral compass, ultimately ending his suicide. This period also marked a time when global ideological alignments were forming between the US and the Soviet Union. Young people trapped in the capitalist machinery naturally swung from one extreme to another. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the vast ideological structure crumbled, leading the Western world into a neoliberal consumerist era. This era saw a widespread loss of ideals, increased despair, and a sense of psychological fragmentation. By the millennium, many creators and scholars felt a deep sense of betrayal towards their ideas and beliefs. Those who carried the banner of hippie movement in the 1960s mostly became beneficiaries of the neoliberal era. The breakup of the Beatles saw Paul McCartney writing innocuous love songs, and Steve Jobs became the CEO of Apple. A narrative even used as neoliberal advocates in films like Forrest Gump. Around 2000, there was an explosion of left-wing works because many from the 1960s were still awake and wanted to make themselves heard. This period saw the emergence of works like L'Avant de la Nuit, Fight Club, and American Psycho, and the rapid development of left-wing science fiction, with many great left-wing works appearing in both the animation and film. During this period, Western countries transitioned from industrial manufacturing states into financial hegemony, shifting entirely from industrial production to consumerism. Behind the rise of Baizuo is a prosperity of consumerist labels, classifying everyone into countless categories and matching them with various products to signify their identity. The middle class, originally defined by money, status, and living standards, is now defined by consumerist products. In Fight Club, the protagonist, who shuttles between IKEA showrooms and work cubicles, falls into endless mental depression, eventually shooting himself to kill his other self. In American Psycho, the protagonist, meticulously dressed and shuttled among Wall Street elites, engages in soulless works, which makes him develop the capitalist obsessive-compulsive disorder with an impeccable appearance that needs to keep his business cards, hair, and body machine-produced-like precise. Ultimately, he becomes a murderous maniac in his fantasies. Then, another decade later, the global film and the television industry became monopolized by media giants. As I have repeatedly mentioned before, American news media, television media, and films were all bought out by 6 major media giants. The content industry finally encountered collective death and silence. Previously, American films with American in the title, like American Beauty, American Psycho, and American Gods, were mostly critiques of the American dream and capitalism. However, films like American Pie turned into soap operas about youth sexual liberation, leading global youth media consumption to degenerate into garbage. Movies and TV series depicting middle-class life were increasingly occupied by consumerist brainwashing shows like The Devil Wears Prada. The world is drowned into consumerist trash, being exploited while massaged spiritually. People collectively lose the ability to think and become brainless zombies in the content consumption factory. Finally, while all great literary and artistic works left-wing, especially those that stand the test of time, it is because critiques of capitalism have persisted for 300 to even 500 years. Only in the past 30 years has neoliberalism stolen the fruits of left-wing criticism, allowing ignorant masses and capitalist writers to engage in aesthetic and creation, destroying all previous literary and artistic achievements. This has led to ignorant scholars and creators singing hymns of capitalism, utilizing capital, markets, and media to destroy centuries of intellectual pursuit and exploration by global intellectuals. Over the past few centuries, criticism of capitalism was mainstream, while singing its hymns was considered blatant foolishness. However, the past 30 years has seen a trend of calling black white and burying centuries of reality. I created this video series to set things right, showing that the right-wing literature and art and the capitalist patronage are pure garbage and fodder, purely anti-intellectual and toxic, blinding everyone worldwide. 30 years ago, young people around the world were still reading great literary works. After just 30 years, they can only consume short videos and pornography. This is a fact that should alarm intellectuals globally. Moreover, global left-wing scholarship and creative work have always influenced each other. Under the influence of Marx and Engels, we have Ibsen, Foucault, and the intellectuals from prestigious institutions like the École Normale Supérieure, Arthur Miller, and the 1960s hippie movement, and the France May 1968. However, the participants in these movements have all become dispirited urban middle class in this neoliberal era, which prompt left-wing intellectuals around 2000 to collectively look back. Marxism and its later splits and updates the development of linguistics, semiotics, psychoanalysis and psychology, and even the fragmentation and shifts of all disciplines in the neoliberal era have clear developmental trajectories. Now, it seems that tracing this lineage is far more important than showing off your knowledge or falling into the trap of classifying academic categories. The more you fall into the trap, the more you overlook the origins of a discipline from half a century or a century ago. They actually originated from pursuit of science, democracy, and freedom, which are unrelated to academic or technical bureaucracy. Therefore, while tracing these origins, I will also try to explain these artistic works in plain language rather than using obscure and academic theories. Thanks to all of you. I'm Meng. See you next time.